Hey guys, Josh Williams here from the One Man Podcast with a bonus episode for you today with my good buddy Trevor Wilson. I didn't get an opportunity to plug a few things during the interview itself, so I just wanted to say, if you guys enjoy this episode, please come see him at Absolute Comedy. He is there for the next 3 days, June 22nd to the 24th of 2018. So be sure to go to absolutecomedy.ca and either buy tickets online or find out how to reserve. Don't miss your opportunity to see this super funny guy. Also, Trev has an album available on iTunes. I'm sure you can get it elsewhere as well. I'm just not 100% sure all platforms, but the album is called Sex Cop Fire Penis. That is where I'm going to be playing you a couple of little tracks from that throughout the course of the episode. Well, just to pepper in some of his, his jokes or whatever. A few of them he references throughout the course of the episode. So just so you get to hear them along the way. Just if it sounds like rough edits in, I didn't leave gaps for the jokes. So I hope you guys enjoy this interview with my good friend, Trevor Wilson, super funny comedian. And as always, these interviews are brought to you guys by my partners at Absolute Comedy. Enjoy the episode, guys, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Yeah!
It's Josh Williams here, and welcome to another bonus episode of the One Man Podcast, guys. Today, my guest, oh man, I can't say enough good things about this guy. He won the Homegrown competition at the Just for Laughs Festival. He's the star of Crave TV's Letterkenny. He's performed on Jimmy Kimmel Live. He's got a great album out on iTunes called Sex Cop Fire Penis. And lots of other, he's open for Louis C.K., Sarah Silverman, Patton Oswalt. The list goes on, and he's here with me today. Thank you so much, Trevor Wilson, for being on the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Josh.
Yeah, we just left an afternoon show at Adobe.
Yeah,
the Photoshop people.
Nice.
What'd you think of that?
They were nice. Afternoon shows are always weird because, we're not in a club setting. So, and these people are at their office. So, you never want to be the only person laughing at a bit, or putting myself on the other side. If I was in the audience, there's nothing probably worse than being the only person to find a questionable joke funny and having everyone else in the office be like,
I didn't know that about you, Phil.
That's your sense of humor? Oh,
absolutely. And they had drinks served too.
Yeah.
Right? We're still polishing off pretzels.
So many pretzels. It was their wellness.
Right?
They were doing a whole thing about wellness, and then this was like their blow off the wellness party. Let's bring in some fat comedians and feed everyone pretzels.
Yeah. Free, and they had so much beer left over. Did you see all the cases? And they were like, what do we do with this free beer? And I'm like, shit, I should have said no to the pretzels. Then I could put my hat in the ring for the beer.
Josh has a trunk full of pretzels. So
I really do. I left them in the car.
You see him in the street.
Yeah. I finally found a good purpose for that black car sitting in the heat. It's a pretzel warmer. I might start my own pretzel wagon like in The Simpsons. Maybe that's it. I'll just do corporate shows and try to get the leftovers. So thanks for doing this, dude. I know you got a show this evening and we're fitting this in between two shows. So I do appreciate you taking the time to sit down.
No worries.
Yeah. So I'm going to ask you the same thing that I ask just about everybody else is how did you get into maybe what was life before comedy and how did you get into comedy?
I think I had a typical childhood, but I started in entertainment when I was about 14. I was a kid actor before I got into stand-up. So my first, I was just really interested in performance. I think I was 7 years old when I figured out that playing Uncle Buck was John Candy's job.
Yeah.
And it was like, oh, wait. So my dad goes to an office, but John Candy is Uncle Buck for money. I'm like, that's gotta be a way better job. And I was always into comedy. It's one of my favorite things. Just seeing people laugh might be my favorite thing in the world. And my dad said that when I was a little kid, I understood what was funny before I could possibly know why it was funny.
Okay.
He'd watch shows with me and my mom would be like, this is inappropriate. And he's like, there's no way that he understands what's happening. But anytime that there was a joke, I laughed. I knew that it was a joke. I knew that it was funny. And it's like, there's no way you understand why that's funny. There's no way you get the references, but you laughed because you knew it was a joke.
You had like a sixth sense for timing kind of thing. You could tell maybe by the cadence and,
yeah,
or you were like one of those pigs that can smell the truffles, 6 feet underground.
I don't know what it was, but I just I loved comedy, and Dad showed me stuff way earlier than I was supposed to see it too. I remember watching Life of Brian when I was about 7.
Yeah.
And I when I was a little kid, the funniest part of that whole movie to me was in the beginning when the little painting of Jesus is flying up and gets right in front of the sun and screams and plummets back to earth in a fiery mess. I thought that was absolutely hilarious. But like I started out, I was doing like I used to do all my presentations in school were like performances. I'd do a sketch, or I'd write a small play, and that's how I would do my class presentation. And so my teacher I was like too shy to actually go out for the school play, but like my teacher could tell that like that's really where I wanted to go. So she talked to the teacher in charge of the school play, and I got in 6th grade. I was the script prompter for the school play. So I sat with the director, who was a professional actor, Roger Barton, and I made sure everyone was like on with their lines. They were doing Shakespeare's Midsummer Night's Dream, so it was quite a lot for middle school students to wrap their mouths around, the Bard. And so I because I was there every day reading the script and making sure everyone was on point, I learned the entire play. And so
you could understudy.
That's what they did. They made me the male understudy. So if anyone couldn't make rehearsal, and at one point it looked like one kid was going to miss a performance, and they actually had me in his costume, and he showed up just in time, and we switched outfits. But I became like the male understudy, or the stand-in. So I stood in and learned every part. And Roger sort of saw that I had this knack for this, and talked my parents into getting me into acting classes. So I started taking classes at Young People's Theater in Toronto. They have a really good program for kids if they're interested in theater, and they do summer workshops, but they also do like after school and weekend stuff. And I did that for many years. And then after I did the script prompting for the school play, every year after that, I had the confidence to audition, and the teachers would do like, in 7th grade, the teachers like, you'd better audition this year. And I was like, okay. So I went out and auditioned, got roles subsequently every year after that. And then I knew I wanted to stick with it. So I auditioned for the Etobicoke School of the Arts for their drama program. And I got into that. And when I was in 9th grade, so I'd started high school, my grade school called me up and asked me if I'd come back and do their school show again, because they were doing Shakespeare. They were doing Much Ado About Nothing, and they wanted to bring back some students who'd worked on the Midsummer Night's Dream production, so that they had it could help the younger students sort of work with the source material. So a buddy of mine, Pat Doyle, we both were in high school and came back and did the play, and I got cast as Dogberry. And I kind of felt bad for like all the kids at the school, because it's like, for some of them, this should have been their chance to like finally have the lead in the play, and they bring back guys who left to steal the roles from them again. But doing that show, because like all the school plays at my grade school were it was either Shakespeare, or they did a play written by my gym teacher and his wife, who ran the school's like theater production every year. It was my gym teacher, Mr. Long, and his wife. And they would always integrate whatever show they did with gymnastics and dance. They had like a gymnastics and dance club at the school. So they combined that with like the drama club. And so all of our school shows would have like intervals, like dance numbers, but like Cirque du Soleil kind of dance numbers. Cause all these kids would be doing like flips and cartwheels. And like, I remember at one point, like 2, grade 2 students, doing like, a walkover thing where like they're holding each other around the waist and their legs are sticking out opposite sides.
They do that flip over each other.
Flip over and flip over. And so all of our school shows had this weird gymnastics aspect to it. But it also meant that the entire stage was like covered in crash mats and gymnastic mats. So you could get away with amazing pratfalls as and I always had the comic relief role. So I was always doing ridiculous crap. And just doing like giant, big overdone falls. And so when I was playing Dogberry somewhere in the second act, I would have this really moment where I get really excited because there's going to be a trial, and I would, end up hurting myself. I was so excited, like I'd walk into a door frame and then stumble backwards and fall down a flight of stairs for cheap laughs in the second act. And one of the girls, actually, Catherine Long, who's my gym teacher's daughter, who also went to the school, she was already a professional actor. She'd done a bunch of things at that point, including she was the lead in the Goosebumps Haunted Mask.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
Blonde girl. If I'm not mistaken. Yeah.
So her agent had come to see the show and saw me hurtling myself down a flight of stairs for cheap laughs, and was like, well, he's just doing this for laughs. I can get him paid for that. And that was actually her pitch. So she gave me her business card, and I talked to my parents, and they were like, as long as it doesn't mess with your school, this is what you want to do, you can do it. So we had a meeting with Mary, and she, took me on as a client, and she's still my agent.
Very cool.
We've been together for, doing the math in my head real quick now, 23 years.
Wow.
We've been working together. She hasn't always been my main agent, because when I first signed with her deal was she repped kids.
Right.
So when I reached 16, I got moved up to the adult agent, but she still repped me for industrials and commercials.
Okay.
So Mary always had a hand, and I was originally with the Core Group was the agency, and years ago they dissolved the talent half, and now they're just a literary agency. But at the time they were well respected, literary and talent, and so I ended up having several agents through the Core Group, with Mary always having a hand in my thing, just because it was such a shit time for the business.
Right.
People would retire or go off to do other things. Like one of my agents retired. Another one of my agents, Scott Notman, who's I still keep in touch with, and actually he's cousins with Mel Scarfano, who plays Winona Earp, but also Mrs. McMurray on our show. So it's always a small world. He was like, I can't do this. I got a family. I'm going back to teachers college.
Oh, wow.
I was like, okay, thanks for helping. Scott, to his credit, got me my SNL audition. That never went anywhere because I sent a terrible fucking tape to them. But he got me a solicited audition. Like they were expecting my tape.
That's awesome.
But so that's how I started. And then my first job was actually a Goosebumps episode called The Haunted Mask Part 2. So Catherine was in that as well. So it was kind of fun because the family that helped me find my agent were in my first job with me. And I think actually Mary repped like 3 of us in
that episode?
On that episode. At least 3 of us on that episode. And yeah, that was my start in acting, was playing bullies in Canadian television. Actors are teeny tiny little people. And I pretty much was, by the time I was 14, I was 5'10", probably 200 pounds. So, and I mostly had this voice. My voice dropped. My voice dropped in 7th grade. I went from a soprano in the school choir to a bass overnight. So I'd go into it when I was 14, 15. I was going into auditions, and I had this like serious low man voice and this chubby baby face, and it was really hard to get work because I played older than my age.
Right.
And they don't want that. They need someone that's older that plays younger, because they don't like hiring teenagers to play teenagers because there's too many rules.
Right.
They want someone in their 20s who looks 14 to play 14, because an actual 14-year-old, you got to make sure there's a tutor, there's all these things that make it harder. There's limits to how many hours they can work and all.
Aaron Power really should be a child actor. He would be.
Aaron Power,
the look on your face
could clean up. Like literally, he should just be doing Degrassi for the rest of his life. Just, how come he's never graduated? But
he could have been Tom Holland. He could have been Spider-Man.
They want someone in their 30s who looks, 14. That's it's like I always had casting agents tell me like, you're going to grow into your type. Like you're eventually going to be an age where you can play where you can But for a long time, my struggle was that I was physically bigger than, most of the actors. So like a lot of the teenage roles I would go out and read for, it's like frightened child. And I'm not believable as a frightened child. And so I played bullies. That was my bread and butter for many years, was playing bullies. For a good 2 years, the only job I got was beating up handicapped people in made-for-TV movies.
Oh, my God.
I don't know what it was about my face that
You're
said,
a sweetheart.
said, I hate the handicap, but that was the job I had. I actually did a movie with Blake Lively's brother.
Oh, okay.
It was a Meredith Baxter Burney film, the mom from Family Ties, called Crash Course, and it was based on a true story about a kid who gets hit by a drunk driver and gets brain damage because they have to remove part of his brain to save his life, and then the mother and the father's fight to, get drunk driving made more illegal. I really don't
made
know.
more illegal.
Prosecute this guy and the difficulties of raising the son. And Blake Lively's brother played the guy. And I was actually in my first year of Humber when I got that role. And I played a jock, which was always funny when I got hired to play an athlete of any kind. And my character's name was literally Jock.
Jock, yeah.
And it was like me in a Letterman's jacket. And, my scene is I'm walking through this, we're on a train going home, and I walk past and I see this hockey helmet, so I smack it. And of course, it's a kid with brain damage, so it hurts him. So then he gets up and confronts me for smacking him in the head, and I deny doing it. But he knows that I did it and guilts me, and then later on sends me a muffin to show me that it's okay. And that he's a good person. I don't know. I really don't know what the point of that.
Now, that was the script, or that just happened to be the unfortunate set of extras that were in the scene?
That was the script.
You just walk through, they're like, improvise, you smack some kid in a helmet, and it turns out he's got brain damage.
This was the script, and I remember because we were shooting in an actual via train,
right?
In the train warehouse, in South Etobicoke in Toronto, and. So the video village was set up outside of the train, and every time we yelled cut, Blake Lively's brother would get up and go and watch the playback. And I was, this was my first year at Humber, but that night was like my high school convocation, everyone was getting their diploma. So all the graduates were supposed to come back to the high school to get the diploma. And so I really was hoping that we would have a quick day, and shooting had been, there was my original call time, and then they had an earlier call time. They called it, see if I could show up earlier, and I rushed there hoping, oh my God, maybe we'll be finished early. But then there was complications that we didn't end up starting till the original start time anyways. But every time he left, it was just you're holding up the shoot.
Oh, right.
We can let's just go.
Yeah.
And the director will tell you, you don't have to see. And I remember at one point we redid a scene because he didn't like how his hair was sticking out from the helmet. And in my head, all I could, I didn't say this, but in my head, all I could think is you're playing a mentally handicapped guy. Is your hair, is the hair going to be your character's number one concern?
Right.
But we had to do our close-ups, our reactions. And he was an actor, and he really believed in himself as an actor. And so he needed a perfect sight line. So he asked if I would get close to where's the sight line going to be? And then he needed my face in there. And I remember I was just hugging a cameraman to supply this guy with the sight line he needed for the scene. And we did and we'd do a take, and then he'd leave, and then
go
come
watch
back, and we'd do another take, and then he'd leave. And I was just getting fed up with this. And I just turned to the camera guys and I was like, while we're waiting for him, can we do my reactions?
Yeah.
And they were like, you don't need him to read lines? I'm like, I have an idea. One of you grab a script and read his lines. I'm going to do this crazy thing I heard about called acting. And we did 3 takes of my reactions in the time it took him to go to the booth and come back. And what's funny is he was standing next to the director, and they radioed the director and said, we're just going to shoot K. Trev's reactions. And the director was like, okay.
Yeah.
That's fine. And so I guess they didn't say anything to him because he came back and he's like, so do we want to do yours now? And I'm like, oh no, we're done. And he was like, what do you mean? I was like, oh, well, we decided not to wait for you. And while you were out there, we did 3 takes. And he was like, oh, you didn't need to read the lines? Like, no, it turns out we didn't need you at all. They just told me where approximately you would be. I looked in that area and I recorded the things that I had to say. It was great. And he was like, oh, okay. And
they don't
walked away. And this old woman who was an extra put her hand on my arm. And I leaned over and she like sort of called me down. And she's like, we have been waiting for a week for someone to put that little prick in his place. Thank you so much.
There's dude, I think I've been on 2 shows where I actually had lines, but I've done a lot of extra work, and some of those shoots where and as the extra, you do nothing. You stand there, you do what you're told, and that's it. And this happened recently. I was doing one we were filming overnight, and it was the scene where, this guy walks into the room. I'm just a cameraman. That's it. I walk out of the room. Action. I walk out of the room. But the actor walks into the room, and we pass almost at the same time. And our timings were off. Sometimes he'd come in too early and block me, and then I'd go around or whatever. But there was one time, out of nowhere, right as I was going out of the door and he was going to the door, he just looks over me. He's like, "Can you grab me a cup of coffee or whatever?" And it's like, and I walked in. I was like, that's not the line. He hasn't said that to me once so far. But I'm walking right towards where the craft table is. And so I'm like, he might be serious. And the last thing I want to do is piss him off. So I walk over and I get him 2 coffees like he asked for. I didn't know what to put in them. So I made one of them, cream and sugar, one of them just cream or whatever. And I come back and one of the ADs is like, he's like, what are you doing with the 2 coffees? I go, well, I don't think I'm supposed to get these. But on the way out, he was like, hey, grab me a couple coffees. And he wasn't mic'd, he was walking up to where the boom was. So I'm like, I would rather be safe and not need them. And I swear to God, he gets on the radio, starts telling people, oh, you'd never believe what Josh just did. They all know me from other things they've actually worked with me on with we did home reno TV shows and stuff together with this same crew here in Ottawa. So they all know me. They all know what I do and everything like that. But they thought it was the funniest fucking thing in the world. The actor comes back. He's like, oh, dude, you're the best. That's so much. He's like, no, I like to sort of fuck around a little bit and just was getting in character. I'm like, we did like 7 takes before that. I did a
movie a couple of years back called The Art of the Steal, which is on Netflix.
Yeah, and, I've seen it.
Mike Wilmot's in it, and Jay Baruchel and Kurt Russell star, and Matt Dillon's in it. And I had a scene with Matt Dillon, and it's actually Scott McCrickard, another Toronto comic. We played Polish mobsters in this movie. We're in the opening sequence, and I had a scene with Matt Dillon, and we're waiting, for action to do this walk through the museum that we're doing. And Dillon is an actor. Like Matt Dillon, there's a reason that guy's been working as long as he has. He is a phenomenal actor, and he starts before action. He's in character, and I'm an idiot. And so I'm sitting there, and McCrickard and I are wearing velour tracksuits.
Okay. Polish mobsters.
With big gold chains. And Matt Dillon comes up to me we're waiting for action. I'm just sort of leaning against the wall, and he comes up and he's like, this is a good suit. This is good. This is a good look on you. I like this look. Yeah, this is a good look. And I'm like, oh, thanks. I really had nothing to do with it. The wardrobe lady picked it out. And he gives me this look. And I was like, oh, shit, you're acting. You're acting, and I'm an idiot. I'm sorry, Matt Dillon. You're a good actor, and I'm an idiot. I'm sorry. You probably shouldn't talk to me. I'm an idiot. And I was like, this was wardrobe? And they yell action, and he goes off, and I'm just like, oh, I'm the most embarrassed I've ever been.
Oh, that stuff's funny. So you're acting, you've been in several things. Where does comedy come into play? Where do you decide I'm going to start doing stand-up? You said you were in Humber, so obviously you were already sort of...
I always loved comedy, as I said. And it's like I got into acting, and, most of the stuff I did was, either playing bullies or, it was silly crap, whatever. Lots of dumb commercials, too. But I always loved the comedy part. And the one thing I found about studying acting is they really glaze over comedy pretty quick. Mm-hmm. Like they focus so much time on technique and this and that. And God, the number of times I've had to do absurdist theater and Chekhov and Ibsen and just the most talking out your ass horseshit from theater. And I get it. It's classics and they're wonderful, but they're also fucking boring. And you know it. You all know it. It's the Emperor's New Clothes. You all just pretend it's so good because you don't want to be the one idiot who goes, this is really fucking boring. Why did I spend my money on this? But like, and then comedy was just like one unit in 10th grade was the comedy unit.
Right.
And I was like, but the comedy is when they're like, I mean, plays are broken up into dramas and comedies. Like it's one of the main things. How do we just glaze over that? How do we not focus on the technique of the thing that you were going to spend half of your career trying to do?
The logo is literally the two masks, 50% of it being the comedy.
How
mask.
do we just gloss over that?
Yeah.
And then like I talked to my friends who'd gone on to do, drama in university and they were all, I'm like, what's it like? And they're like, it's preparing me to be a high school drama teacher. They're like, it's not preparing me to be an actor. Like the skills I'm learning are going to make me a wonderful scholar of drama, but I don't feel like I'm getting better as an actor. And then so when I was looking for my post-secondary, I always loved comedy. And I'd already actually, when I was in 10th grade, my buddy and I started taking Second City improv classes.
Okay.
Because that was when we had the unit in comedy and we just were like, that's it. That's all we're going to do. And so we wanted to do more. And at the time, Second City didn't have youth classes. There was, it was all adults. So my parents were like, our kids want to do this. They're 14. And the Second City was like, well, we don't really offer classes for kids. So they would have to be in classes with adults. Are they okay? And it's like, yeah, you like I think my dad was like, you'd be hard pressed to come up with something my kid hasn't already said. So you're not going to offend them or shock them. I guarantee you. And, so Second City acquiesced and they're like, okay, as long as they're not disruptive and are comfortable doing it. And so my buddy Matt Park and I were at one point the youngest people to ever study improv with the Second City. And like the closest person to our age in our class was like 18-year-old. It was my friend Maeve, who's turns out her brother sang at the local bar in our neighborhood, Matt O'Grady. And but I mean everyone else was like 30 something, 40. It was half of it was like people who wanted to be entertainers, and the other half were like accountants who had to do the occasional presentation and needed to learn how to loosen up.
They're treating it more like a Toastmasters thing as opposed to, improv and comedy.
So we did several years of doing those classes, and actually helped start an improv group at the Etobicoke School of the Arts with a bunch of other students. And I got to work with terrific teachers, Al Catlin and Lisa Merchant and Jerry Schaefer and Moira Dumphy, who were all, like Second City, and the Moira and Jerry were in the Chumps with a bunch of other great, and Lisa. So like really great Toronto improvisers and comedians, and we got to learn from them. But by the time I finished high school, I was like, I don't want to do another 4 years of Ibsen.
Right.
And my buddy Liam, leafing through the Humber College pamphlet, found a comedy writing and performance class, and I was like, well, that's what I'm going to do then. I'm going to go study comedy. And it was a bit of a fight with my mom.
Right.
She wanted me to go to university. Mom was always a nervous one, and God bless her. You need that in your life. My dad, I think he always secretly wanted to be a performer. So he was always like gung-ho about it. Like, you want to do it, go ahead and do it. I think he regretted going into business and wished he'd because my grandma was a performer. She was, her and her identical twin sister had a song and dance team, the Pierce Sisters, back at like turn of the century, Saskatchewan.
Okay.
They were born and raised in Moose Jaw and learned how to tap dance by correspondence. A dance school in New York would mail them these folded up dance numbers that had all the steps mapped out on the floor, and they would unroll these giant things and their steps would be there, and that's how they'd learn their dance routines, was on these giant mats. And so
it's like IKEA instructions for dance kind of thing.
And they ended up, when they were 18, they got invited to do like an Alaskan showboat cruise, and their mom made them take their older sister with them to be their chaperone. And God, it was probably the only adventurous thing my grandma's older sister ever did in her whole damn life. And
was a chaperone on an Alaskan boat cruise.
Alaskan showboat cruise, and then they came back from that, and Grandma performed forever, and they opened their own dance studio in Vancouver, and then the Depression hit, and no one had money for dance classes, so that went out the window. They had to give that up, but because they were performers, they during the Depression they would go out and they would perform at hotels and restaurants and entertain people, and then they'd get free room and board, food. That they could always have a night out with their husbands because they could do a show in exchange for a nice evening.
Right. And
but the performance bug had kind of always been in my family, but no one had the guts to chase it till I showed up. And but Mom was always scared of everything. She, my dad's a glass half full. My mom's someone's going to come and take the glass. So she always wanted me to be a lawyer or something. So she was like, you could be an entertainment lawyer. See, then you're still in entertainment, but you're a lawyer.
You could be a comedy club owner.
And I'd be like, no, Mom, because then I'd end up repping someone that's awful, and I'd be angry because I'd know I'm better than them secretly.
Yeah. Well, now we're in an age now where people are encouraging everybody to take the chance too. Like all of the whole, hey, have something to fall back on. And then, and in interviews like this that I've heard hundreds of comics who same thing. Their parents are like, why don't you just get something to fall back on? And Brian Regan was saying in his, he's like, I just couldn't do it. He's like, I did it. But the whole time I'm like, I don't even want to do well on these tests or whatever. Cause I'm like, I'm pursuing a negative goal. I'm pursuing something that I don't want to have happen.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So
one of my theories was like, I'm really lazy. So if I'm like working hard at this thing, why, like I'm not going to want to work hard at another thing. And what if I get too comfortable being a lawyer and my dream goes out the window? So, I mean, like I'm a firm believer that you need to have a job. Like I've had buddies who are like, I'm going to quit everything and see how comedy does. And it's like, well, how's comedy doing? Is comedy paying the bills now? No. Yeah. Then don't quit your job.
Yeah.
You don't quit your job until
you have another job.
I never quit my job. My last day job, I was a line cook at Kelsey's. And I sort of, when I started at that restaurant, I went in and I was like, I'm a comedian. You need part-time employees. I will come in part-time. If I don't have gigs and you need someone to work more hours, I will be available. Like anytime I am here and available, you can call on me and I will show up and I will work. I'm like, but this is my main priority and I will go and do this. And if you ever tell me not to do this, I will leave.
Yep.
And that's the way it goes. And the boss who hired me was like, cool, you're straightforward. I get it. I think we can work around this. And then, I worked there for a few years, and it just got to a point where I was on the road so much that, I had seniority in the kitchen. So anytime I was there, I got the best hours, but I was on the road so much that when a new manager came in to take over, he was looking at the books and was just like,
who's this guy?
This doesn't make any sense. So he just stopped. He just told them to not put me on the schedule anymore. So I would call in for shifts and they'd be like, you're not on the schedule. And I was like, okay. I'm like, should I come in and talk to somebody? And they're like, you probably should. I'm like, okay, well, I'm going on the road, so I might do that after. And then I went on the road and I just never called in after that. I just waited for them to call me. And they never did. And I actually talked to someone earlier this year. I'm still technically employed by that Kelsey's in Etobicoke. Because they have never finalized my termination because they had no grounds to fire me. So they tried to force me to quit. And technically that is illegal. So they actually owe me a severance package from that restaurant because they just stopped working me. They made my job obsolete. And but I've never bothered to go in. They actually tore down and like rebuilt that restaurant, but I'm still on the books.
So
there. Like,
you should wait till you're like in your 50s and then be like, oh, well, it turns out I'm terminated now. And I've got 20 years of tenure at this place. So that severance package is looking good. We got to give him his yearly amount for every year he worked here.
if anyone listening to this is from the Cara Corporation, the Kelsey's at Queensway and Etobicoke, I'm still technically employed at. And if you can reach out and talk, you owe me money.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to be a dick about it. We can come to an amicable agreement.
Gift cards.
Yeah.
How many gift cards?
How many gift cards?
That's
Kelsey's.
awesome.
Geez, last time I was in a Kelsey's, Kelsey's, you're a good company, but you're starting to get into American serving sizes. No one needs a fish bowl of ice cream, and you know that.
Yep. So do you remember, like, what was your first time on stage doing stand-up like?
Well, my first attempt at doing stand-up was a high school talent show.
Oh, really?
I guess it was I did impressions at a 5th grade talent show. And I can't do any of the voices now because my voice has changed. But it was like, it was Looney Tunes characters or Tiny Toons characters. That was like probably the first time I stood up and did something that resembled stand-up in front of a crowd. And then I auditioned for a talent show in high school doing stand-up, but it wasn't a very good stand-up, so I didn't end up doing it. But then my first time like getting up on a stage and really doing stand-up was my first year at Humber at the Ajax Yuck Yucks, because it was easier to get on in Ajax than it was in Toronto. So we'd all call in, on the Tuesday, and we just sort of had a group that we'd call in, and with whoever of us got on, we'd all drive out.
Okay, and you could book everybody?
Sometimes we'd get everybody on. Sometimes we'd only get a few of us on, but we'd all go out anyway.
Oh, okay.
We'd all go out as a team, support each other, and just try to meet comics and meet people like that. Like doing that, like we'd hang out after the show and have drinks with the comics, and that's how I met
so smart
Tim Nutt and Martha Chavez and Jason Rouse and Derek Edwards. All these comics, because they were, Mark Trinidad. One of my very first tape of my set, Mark Trinidad sat down next to my friend and started making jokes about me to the thing, and then he came up and told me that he did it so that I wasn't pissed off. So I don't know where that tape is. Dustin Ladishewski probably still has it. There's a tape of one of my first stand-up sets, and Mark Trinidad chirping me the whole time. That was, and I was cocky too, because I'd come from a theater background, because I'd done, 5 years of theater school. I had Second City training. I had, all this training going in.
You didn't come with the stage fright that I'm sure a lot of comics would come
first time
in.
I did stand up, I was like, this is nothing. I've done a monologue recital. I've done a one-man show, but it's different when you're the writer and the director and the producer and the star. Like when you've done everything, standing up and reading and reciting the words of an award-winning show.
It's already polished material.
It's already
point.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
All you have to do is not fuck it up. But when it's all your stuff, and you think it's hilarious, and then you get up there and do it to a crowd, and it's like, oh, I'm the only one who thought that was funny. And and I remember my first set, I had 2 jokes that worked, and one of them I'd written on the way into the parking lot about the setup of the strip mall that the Ajax Yuck Yucks was in, because there was an adult video store next to a milk store. And I'm like, that just seems wrong to me. Like, I don't know why, but I would definitely be questioning the content of that milk. And that got a laugh, and then nothing else got a laugh until I said, when they introduced me, they said I was a student of comedy at Humber College, and apparently I skipped too many classes, and that got a big laugh. I'm like, so I'm not funny, but I'm just not funny just not everything I think is funny, or I don't know how to make it all funny for everyone else. And it was actually the advice Mike McDonald gave me when we, at the second Canadian Comedy Awards, me and my buddies got Mike into the VIP lounge and plied him with weed to give us an education on comedy. And he wanted to make sure he left us with a lasting piece of advice. And he was like, he racked his brain. He's like, I want to give you guys something good, and I think I've got it. He's like, never throw away a joke. Even if it doesn't work the first time, your instincts told you it was funny.
Right.
There's something funny about it, but you just may not be a good enough comic to make it work now. But don't throw it away. Put it in a folder. Put it aside. And every year, look over your old notes. And one day you're going to be a good enough comic to make that joke work. And he's right. There's so many things that it didn't work the first time, and you file it away and you come back to it later and you're like, now I know.
Right.
Now I know.
Now I know how I would have presented that and whatnot.
But that was my first stand-up set was Yuck Yuck's Ajax. I'm pretty sure Tim Nutt was hosting. Martha Chavez was closing it out. Some kid got up and did a whole bunch of jokes from Eddie Murphy's Raw and Delirious. And he got called out.
Right.
that was exciting. That was
not that I would ask you to name names, but do you remember who it was?
Yeah, I never saw him again.
Oh, okay, fair enough. Because we have those, and sometimes you have them who did it. Yeah, call that now. They've gone on. And
yeah, no. He wasn't one of us. He wasn't a Humber student. He was some guy who showed up, brought all of his friends, and just did stolen material.
Yeah, because maybe the friends didn't know. We've had that when I used to run the Mondays. We'd have people, when people signed up and said, "What do I have to do?" I would just tell them, "The stage is yours. There's no auditions or anything like that. You can go up and do whatever you want." I go, but just know, as much as maybe the crowd won't know, it's got to be original material, because maybe the crowd doesn't know, but the comedians in the room know. You know what I mean? We know who's.
Yep.
We're fans of what we do. It's like when someone finds out, oh, you're a comedian. Do you know who Russell Peters is, or do you know blah blah blah? And it's like everybody knows who's doing well in their field.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? No one walks up to a hockey player and goes, "Oh my God, have you heard of Sidney Crosby?"
Yeah.
Like, yes, of course I have. I know who's doing well in the field that I would like to be a part of. So but we've told that, and we see people come on stage and they'll do their whole act where it's like Stuart Francis jokes.
Oh yeah.
And they're crushing because they're fucking Stuart Francis jokes. They're amazing jokes, but they're not yours. And the audience wouldn't know Stuart Francis by name or whatever. They may not even recognize it, that they've heard, but they're great stuff. But the rest of us, the comics in the room, are like, all right, look, we get it, but you can't. That's not how this works.
Yeah.
Which is interesting, because I actually had Julian Dion. So funny enough, Julian and I went to an open mic one time where we could do comedy, but it was a music open mic.
Okay.
And the guy on stage, I guess my friend who was running it, he just did all covers of bands all night, which is fine. But Julian was like, "Hey man, just notice you didn't do any of your own stuff all night. It was like all just covers." And he's like, an open mic, you should do something original. Which I just thought it was funny, because as much as we see that music all the time, people do a lot of covers or whatever, no issue whatsoever. But it's like, there's no cover comedy.
Yeah.
Not that there should be.
Well, actually, there is.
Oh, really?
But it's translation comedy.
Oh, okay.
If you go to France, there's guys who are doing other American acts translated.
Really?
There's a French Jerry Seinfeld who does all of Jerry Seinfeld's act translated.
Does he pay royalties for it?
I don't know.
Because that would be a great fucking gig. I have so many comics.
Yeah, no,
I could be French K-Trev. I'll go to France and I'll do it.
Actually, there is a French K-Trev. If you watch Letterkenny,
You're joking.
There's in one episode we go to Quebec and meet our French doppelgangers.
Oh my God.
And they hired an actor from Montreal, Dominic DeRosa, who's become a good buddy of mine. And he looks so much like me that in Sudbury, he'll get stopped all the time. And people will, ask him questions as if he was me. He looks so much like me that last season, when we brought the French guys back, he came around the corner in his wardrobe and my girlfriend double taked to make sure I was still standing next to her.
That's fucking funny. What a great gig, fucking just jack material and do it in another language.
Yeah.
I would love to just speak Spanish, because then I'll go do a great act where all the women are beautiful. I don't have to write anything, and I could just crush every night.
I found out friends of mine, Al and Lindsay Norris, they were on vacation in Amsterdam, and they sent me a picture of this famous Dutch singer who could be my brother.
Yeah.
At the time, we haircut the same, beard trimmed the same, everything about I think he's got blue eyes. That's the only noticeable difference. And they sent me this picture and they're like, "When did you become a famous Dutch performer?" and I looked into the guy's career, and he's like this really famous singer in Dutch, but he started out as an impersonator of another Dutch singer and got so popular impersonating that guy that he started putting out his own material and became his own act. But he started.
Isn't that like Gallagher too? His brother became more famous than him for the act, and
So I look like a guy who got famous because he looked like another guy. So I'm when Letterkenny cancels, I'm just moving to the Netherlands and learning Dutch songs because I can impersonate two fuckers now.
that's great. That's fucking hysterical. Now, this one is, I mean, it's a sort of a average question, but from the time that you started stand up, how quickly did you go from, being an open micer to doing the amateur spots, the guest spots? Like how long before you started getting the paid work?
Oh, it took me forever.
Really?
I got when I went Homegrown, I was 12 years in.
Really? Okay.
I started. My first set was 2000. That's when I started at Humber, and now one of the reasons it was so slow is I was trying to do too much.
Okay.
I was after doing Humber, I was already an actor. Like I already had. I was the only guy in my Humber year who had an IMDb page.
Okay.
So I was already trying to do acting work. I had a day job. I was in college. Well, I guess I didn't have a day job. I had an evening job. I was in college. I had a sketch troupe, and I was trying to do stand-up. So I was doing a bunch of things okay, but nothing really well. And, I couldn't pick a focus. I wanted to do it all. I wanted to have all the experience. And my belief is always to be the most well-rounded performer I could be. You have to try everything.
Right.
You have to do stuff just because you think it's going to be hard. And so I always wanted to challenge myself, but I found that I was just spinning my tires because I was never doing enough of one thing to gain traction on it. And after a couple rough years and running out of money and earning money back, I was like, I got to make a decision on what I do. And I was like, okay, well, it's got to be stand up because that's the one I can control.
Right.
Like, the acting is great, but there's too many people making decisions in that. Like you never know whose nephew or cousin you're auditioning against. You never know what it is that's going to. You could give them the best audition ever, but something's going to keep you out of that role.
Right.
Like I did a reading once in an audition, and the casting agent was like, "That's the best read for that role we've ever had. You are 5 years too young."
Fuck's sakes.
And it's like, so even if you're amazing at it, there's something could hold you out of it. And then with a sketch troupe, you're relying on, 2 to 3 other people being as focused as you, as devoted as you. You get those people have to, and there's no fucking money in sketch. It pays dick. Like even at its highest level, it's not a well-paying job. So he was like, well, stand-up's the one that it all depends on me. I can control when I'm doing it, how I'm doing it, everything. It comes down to me. And I reworked my whole life around stand-up. I was working at Milestones and I quit and I went to
Another Cara.
Yeah. I literally, I gave Milestones my 2 weeks, and then I went 2 restaurants over and applied at Kelsey's because they needed part-time daytime.
Okay.
And I was doing like lead prep. I was doing 14-hour days at Milestones, and it was like, this is killing me.
Right.
So I went across the street to Kelsey's, got hired at part-time day shifts, called my agent and said, I'm focusing on stand-up. Like you can submit me for things, and if I'm available, I'm going to do it. But I got to pick one, I got to pick one to focus on right now. And I'm like, I know it's going to make it harder for you to earn money with me for a while, but trust me, if this thing works, eventually it'll all come back around. And Mary, God bless her, was like, I'm nervous, but okay, go ahead and do it. If you think this is the best way to do it, go ahead and do it. So I reworked my whole life to be about stand up. And I was like, I became every night I was out I was averaging at least a show a night for like 3 months, sometimes multiple shows. I on a good night in Toronto, you could get 4 sets in running around to different rooms. I called it the Mike Rita circuit. That kid had so much hustle. He was the first one to do like all of the pot rooms in the same night.
Right.
And I was like, oh my God, that's possible. And, and that's what I started hitting it as hard as I could. And for years I'd been emailing every club in the country trying to get work. And like, I think I showcased for Breslin 6 times over the years. And I get, in the beginning it was, I didn't get picked up because he wanted me to like, get out there more, do more, work on it a bit harder because I was still kind of just part-time. And then I left and I came back and did another showcase. And not only had I done everything he'd asked me to do, but I did like 3 other things on top of it. And I got passed over again. So I gave me another list of things that he thought I should do. And I went out and I did them. And then, I think it was like a year before I showcased again. And at that point I was starting to become the comedian I was going to become. There was like a little bit of buzz about me in Toronto. I'd had that weird standoff thing where I'd do really well at a show and then a Yucks comic would come up and be like, why aren't you with Yucks? Because there's this weird thing I found that the Yucks comics, if you did well in a show and you weren't on the roster, there'd be this like weird anger from the Yucks comics. Like, what, do you think you're too good to be on the roster? Like, why aren't you working with us? And then they'd come up and be like, so like, why don't you work for Yucks? And I'm like, I've showcased 3 times and Breslin's passed me over. And then they'd be like, oh, that's insane. Okay. Well, like, so you're
right. Yeah. Yeah. You're not too good for that is one of the things that sucks about our industry. Is there is a lot of like, so what do you think you're too? It's like,
why do you think you're too good for this?
Can I just go out and be funny? Can't we all be friends? At the end
like, I don't. I'm just trying to figure this out.
Yeah.
I'd love to be on the roster with you. I'm desperate for work.
I wanted to insert this somewhere in the podcast, so if you don't mind, I'm just going to take this opportunity to,
sure.
to do it. I mean, I've mentioned the credits at the beginning of the show, but when I saw that you were on Kimmel or whatever, I reached out to you that day. I PVR'd it. I probably still have it somewhere on my PVR or whatever, but. In this industry, there's so many opportunities, so many people going after things and sometimes guys get it, the ones that are cutthroat or whatever. Just so the audience knows, you've had a tremendous amount of success and you're one of the cases that every time I see something else that you've got going for you, it makes me smile because you are a genuinely good person.
Oh, thanks.
Off stage. But I mean that, you know what I mean? Like, it's just every time I see something, I'm like, like every now and again, the universe gets it right and it gives it to one of the good guys and not one of the ones who, he stepped on 3 other people and stabbed people. So it's funny when you're talking about Mike McDonald giving you advice. The first time Mikey and I sat down and actually talked, he goes, Josh, can I give you a couple pieces of advice? He goes, there's a couple of things I've learned. He goes, you know how you know who your friends are in Hollywood? They're the ones that stab you in the chest. And I was like, Jesus Christ. And he goes, and then he said to me, he was talking about how, these people said they're going to have him on a show the year after he got his liver transplant.
Yeah.
I was going to say kidney transplant. No, it's liver transplant. And he was saying he wanted to do it. And they're like, yeah, we'll have you on the show. And he goes, I've learned a hard lesson over the years. Only hold your breath when you're underwater. Like, it was all this bleak advice. And I was like, okay, but I figured, who better to know it than that guy who's done it all. And you learn over time that it's kind of like, you get that hostility where it's I just went on stage, I just did my job, I made people laugh, good feelings. And then it is often at times, whether it's because of what roster you're on or, you're not from this town or whatever, where do you like that you're met with hostility sometimes, or at least seemingly hostile just for doing a good job, which is the strangest fucking thing.
Yeah, people are like, what's your deal? What's your bag? And the number of times comics came up in the early days and like, sometimes most people, I've been very lucky that most of the people I've worked with have been wonderful, but every once in a while you get someone trying to sabotage you for whatever reason. And like, I remember someone coming up to me and telling me that I couldn't do a bit I was doing because it was too close to another comic's bit. And I was a big student of comedy and I was very careful to never step on toes. And I was like, and I knew the bit that they were accusing me of doing.
Right.
It was a Sean Majumder bit because I was doing a bit about how I missed kindergarten because it was easier to meet women because all you had to do was like break a Lego castle on them. And it meant you were a couple, you know, and that just goes back to our caveman instincts. That's the most primitive way, you know, to meet someone. That's where the term picking someone up comes from, because they'd club her over the head, pick her up, take her back to the cave.
I heard the same thing, but clubbing. That's what clubbing used to be.
Yeah.
Only you just club them over the head.
And so, and then I was told that it was like, it was too close to the Sean Majumder bit. And it was the Sean Majumder bit about like, your friend's telling you to go tell that girl that she's pretty, and you get so freaked out that instead of telling her she's pretty, you smack her and run away. And so they were definitely not. I was definitely not stepping on Sean's toes.
Yeah,
but like it was like we were in the same world of, you know, it was the same idea, but not the same joke.
How many awkward meeting women jokes are there?
Yeah,
it's the same thing. When I was awkward meeting a girl, only you guys just happen to be talking about the youthful part.
There's an old saying that's like, there's 5 jokes and everything else is just a different version of that joke. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, if you think I'm the only person who's ever come up with this idea ever, you're wrong. Like, you can go through the history of comedy and you will find that someone has done it already. You can go back, read Lysistrata, probably the oldest existing comedy play. It's a Greek comedy, and the entire subject, like the entire play, is about sex and politics. It's about the war between Athens and I want to say the Spartans, but it's not Spartans. Hannibal, who came over the Alps with the elephants.
I don't read.
So it's the 2 warring nations,
right?
And all the men are at war, and all the women are back at home, pissed off at the war. So the women decide that they're not going to fuck the men until the war is over. So they lock themselves up in castles, and the men are refusing to be told what to do for the women. So they're going to keep fighting no matter what. But then slowly the war stops because the men are all going to the castles to try to get the women to come out and fuck them. And finally, there's just no fighting happening because all the men are just outside the door going, "Come on, somebody fuck us." And the women are like, "Not until there's peace." And so they broker peace between the 2 nations. And it's like, yeah, this is the oldest play in existence, and the themes are sex and politics. That's, you know, you're not original with any idea. But but I was freaked out because I was, you know, a year and a half into comedy, and I'd just been called out by a professional comedian for being a joke thief.
Right.
And I remember taking it to Kyle Radke and being like, you know, so-and-so told me that I'm stealing jokes. And he's like, so-and-so is afraid because you had a great set.
Yep.
And they're nervous that you're going to come replace them. So they're doing whatever they can to fill you with doubt. And then I ended up meeting Sean, and I was interviewing him for an internet TV thing. And I was like, while I have you here, and I told him the story and told him the bit. And he was like, I know which bit they think you stole from mine, and you did not. I can tell you right here that is an original joke you wrote. And
yeah,
I was like, I have it on tape. Sean Majumder says I can do the fucking joke.
Yep. I had a friend of mine, Jeff McKay, was doing an interview with Scott Thompson. Now, it wasn't about stealing a joke, but it was just about this joke that I come up with in 5 minutes in a green room, and we were just fucking around. And Jeff liked it so much, he told Scott Thompson, and Scott Thompson's like, you got to do that joke. It was just kind of fun to be like, I've got this little clip, little soundbite somewhere of someone going, it's good, and do it. And it comes from someone that you can respect, right?
I'll tell you, that is one of the best guys to ever have lunch with, is Scott Thompson. That guy has stories for days.
Yep.
I'm always in awe that I've been able to become friends with so many of the people I grew up watching. And, you know, a couple of years ago, I did the Calgary Comedy Festival, and it was hosted by Kevin and Scott and Dave. And to have 3 members of the Kids in the Hall ask you what you want for your introduction, and to bring you up on stage. And it's just like, you know, you're standing shoulder to shoulder with giants at this point.
Well, when you were referring to when you were younger watching Monty Python, I was going to say that I found Monty Python to be, like you were saying, about being able to just find the humor and maybe not even understanding all the jokes, but Monty Python, and I grew up watching that and Kids in the Hall. And these were, in my opinion, 2 shows that were both way ahead of their time. Like, I found that even adults, you know, didn't quite get it. And it's like, they're just way ahead of the time. Like, I mean, growing up in Canada, I don't know how it was in the States, but as a young guy, like, I was very comfortable with the notion of homosexuality, just being a young boy. because of Kids in the Hall.
Yeah.
Just Scott Thompson made gay people accessible to me at a very young age. It wasn't weird and unnatural. I didn't know any gay people, but I knew Scott and I knew characters in the Kids in the Hall, and even just like all of their jokes, whether it was, you know, funny homosexual jokes or skits or whatever it was, all the different storylines and stuff that they had, I found all of it to be way ahead of its time. Like you put that out now and it would still crush, in my opinion. I had the opportunity to host for Scott at the Comedy Nest, and same thing. We got to spend a few nights talking to each other, and some of the fucking things he said. That guy's hysterical and super, super smart.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Did he tell you his thing about beards? Why he thinks that so many men grow, why so many men grow beards now?
No.
So I can't remember what started the conversation. So don't blame me. Don't blame Scott for my recollection of it. But he was saying how like the climate, and he's gay, so he has no interest in getting mad at women for any particular reason. But he was like the climate of it's not okay to be a man kind of thing was what he like. Again, I'm paraphrasing, but he was saying that guys are made to feel like it's not okay to be a man right now, to be, you know, not aggressive, but I guess masculine. Masculinity is seen as maybe, you know, wrong. He goes like, you guys, you know, you have to be careful what you say to women. It used to be that a woman's like, I just want a man to pick me up and carry me off to the bedroom. And it's like, that's aggressive. You know what I mean? Like to even compliment someone, you run the risk of, I don't need your validation or whatever it is. So he goes, as men, you guys are having a hard time basically expressing your masculinity. So that's why so many of you are growing beards now, is you're subconsciously trying to have some form of masculine. And now while I'm not like, that's absolutely correct. I'm like, fuck, that makes a lot of sense. Why a lot of people just out of nowhere want to grow a beard.
I just wanted people to draw attention away from my extra chins.
That's the same
I
thing.
had so much neck going on.
The same thing. As soon as I take it off, they're like, you got some mustard on your chin. No, the other one. I'm like, oh, fuck.
I look like I have a baby face. When I shave this down, I look like a giant toddler.
Oh, he was so
Last time I was completely clean shaven, I was still working in restaurants, and one of the girls I worked with was like, you have no edge. And I was like, what do you mean? She's like, when you take your beard off, there's no danger left. You are completely safe. And she's like, and that's not, and I don't mean that as a compliment.
See, we gotta have a little. I think that's what Scott was saying.
A little bit of edge.
That's probably the best way of it. He's just like, you gotta have a little bit of edge. And if you can't have edge in your personality, because you're like, I don't want to make you feel if there's anything I can just fine, put the fucking edge in my face, make me gruff. I don't know what the fuck we were talking about before that. You were talking about just the grind, and of course, like I said, having conversations with people about that material. The same thing happened to me early on. I think maybe 3 months in, I did a joke, and someone's like, "You can't do that joke. It's like a Ward Anderson joke," and when I saw Ward, like I think a year later, I stopped immediately. I respected it. If someone told me that, if I didn't know the joke, I immediately respected it because I respected the comic who told me, and still do to this day. But this is one of those things where that's the thing that sucks in comedy is you got to be careful because people will tell you, you know, I do a relationship joke. You can't do a relationship joke, you know. Well, fuck, there's only 1 million of them. But I heard the joke a year later. Mine was nothing like his. And in terms of it wasn't even like, oh, we're even talking about the same thing. Like, I think the similarity was the word blowjob was in both the jokes. So I was kind of, so I tell young comics now, if they're like, well, so-and-so said this joke, I go, look, there's odds that you're going to be doing the same stuff as other people. I go, so at the end of the day, if you ethically know that you didn't take the joke and it's not the same as the other person, then just use your best golden rule. All right. If your joke is so similar to theirs that you wouldn't want, I go, if it's brand new, maybe get rid of it. Don't waste your time developing something that pretty much already exists.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But at the same time, if you feel like you got a fresh take, fucking do it.
I remember having a moment like that early on and, you know, calling like a summit of my comedy friends to be like, what do I do? What do I do in this situation? And I'd been for a long, long time. I opened up my show by taking the mic out of the stand and going, I'm just going to get this out of the way so you can see me.
Louis Anderson.
And well, not just Louis Anderson. Right. That was the thing I found out over time. But yeah, and then I did it and I was like, I asked around, I'm like, has anyone else seen anyone do that? And like, no. No one else was doing that in Toronto at the time. Like I was the only guy in Toronto doing that joke at that time. And then one day I'm watching a Louis Anderson special and that's how he opens up his special. I'm like, oh my God. I'm doing a Louis Anderson joke, and it's a throwaway.
Right.
It's it's not even a joke. But at this point, you're so new to your career that you're like, oh my God, like it's a hack line. It is a stalk. That joke is older than Louis Anderson. That's how old, but like I see it and I'm like, oh my God. And I call my friends and I'm like, do I stop doing it? Like, what do I do?
Right.
And I think Pat Thornton was like, you do something different with it. You do something that no one else is doing. And Pat gave me a tag one night when I did it he was in the audience and I'm going to move this because, so you can see me better. And Pat Thornton goes, it's funny because he's tall.
That's great.
Which got an extra laugh. And then that became the tag. And that sort of like in my head was like, this is like, now I'm adding to this old bit. Now,
right.
Pat was like, you should use that because that makes it a different joke. It's not just you have that, but then you have more and you're building on it. And then eventually I just stopped doing it because I saw so many people doing it. Like not even just like fat, it wasn't just a hacky joke for fat guys. It was a hacky joke for everybody. I saw skinny guys doing it. I saw, like so many comics I saw with that thing. And now if I move the mic stand, odds are I'm going to make that joke because it gets a free laugh. But if someone else starts doing it, I'm never going to accuse them of stealing it.
Right? Yeah.
It's like when you do birthdays. When you're emceeing and doing birthdays, the comic, the MC, odds are they did not write that birthday joke. They did not write that crowd work joke because it's crowd work. It's the whole point is you got to be faster than the audience. You got to be smarter than them. And I'll fully admit half the stuff I do on birthdays, I probably stole from David Acker. Like if I'm doing a birthday and you're like, well, you're a woman. I'm not allowed to ask you your age. So how much do you weigh?
Yeah.
Full on. I saw David Acker do that. And then the next time I was emceeing, I had a birthday. I had a woman. I didn't know what to say. I stole that line and it worked.
That one I've seen. I was going to say that's one that it's just almost like part of that universal, tickle trunk of things that we're all allowed to use. Because I've seen other comics from the US, like on specials, use that. And I'd be surprised. Maybe they did see Dave, but the whole like, hey, where'd you learn to whisper in a helicopter? Like, there's lines that just sort of come out. Hey, this guy's available for children's parties. Like, who the fuck knows where that came from?
This isn't TV. We can hear you.
Exactly.
It's like birthdays and heckle handles. And I've told comics, like, if you're dealing with a heckler, say whose ever joke you can think of. You just got to be funnier than the heckler. Yeah. You don't worry about stealing when you're dealing with a heckler or when you're dealing with the fucking birthdays at the beginning of the show. Yeah. You're not stealing. You're getting through it. Yeah. You're surviving.
Yeah. You're not like going into a 12-minute fucking Doug Stanhope bit to get through it. But if you got a line that...
if any comic stands there and goes, you stole that heckle handle, they're not a real comic. Slap him in the fucking face and tell him to get out of your way.
That's my heckle handle.
That's how I deal with hecklers.
That's fucking hysterical.
It's fucking, you're having a conversation with Ron Vaudry. Ron Vaudry wrote every joke that any of us ever tell. And God bless Ron. I love him, but shut up. You didn't write him. Comedy existed before you.
What's that? It's Wayne and Steve Schuster, right? Am I crazy? Was it Steve Schuster, the son, who did had the guitar? Used to do them. He passed away.
I think it was
Steve Schuster.
Yeah.
So he was the one who, when she sits around the house, she really sits around the house, and then he'd laugh and go, huh, "Thank you, I wrote that." He had the great laugh off of just addressing the fact that he clearly did not write that. Right? Thank you, I wrote that. And the big guitar up horizontal on his belly. But so, do you remember like your first paid gig? Like in terms of like, you said you were years after when you got to it. So I guess let's ask a better question.
I remember my first paid gig because it was only a couple years in. I did a charity show out in Grand Bend with my buddy Nick Bailey and my buddy Paul Shook. And Paul, in my opinion, is the funniest friend I met in stand-up who quit stand-up. And I think every comedian has one, some guy that that was doing it when they started out. And then for whatever reason, they left the business. Paul, he'll still get up and do a set every now and again, but he did the responsible thing. He married his girlfriend, got a real job, and raised a bunch of kids. And but Paul was like, he was in a group with Levi McDougall and Tim Polly, and I think the Imponderables, and like they were just doing stuff that no one else was doing in the city at that time. And Paul would he'd bring out his guitar and play weird, funny songs. He had like crazy jokes that I still quote to this day. He was just outside the box thinking he had a joke. He goes, I wish I had a middle name like Ruby or Sapphire, so I'd have something to talk about if I ever met actor Lou Diamond Phillips.
Just silly stuff
Just
like that.
crazy stuff. He'd sing a song about his mom being a ninja. Ninja mum, kung fu, karate chop, woo, woo, woo. He had a whole love song to Joseph Stalin, you're my very favorite Toteri Allen. I still remember all these bits vividly. And then my buddy Nick Bailey, he's marrying a ballerina in November. Him and his brother own a bar in Toronto called Chill Ice House. And Nick had set up that got us the gig. I was out in Grand Bend, and he's from Exeter nearby in Huron County. And so the three of us went out, and we actually went out a day early so we could catch a John Wing show in Sarnia that Larry Horowitz was the opening act for, and Larry was our teacher at Humber. So we got to hang out with John Wing and Larry Horowitz in Sarnia, and then we went to Grand Bend, stayed at Nick's place, did this show. And I remember it was so not only was it probably my first road gig, first paid gig. It was $100 a plate charity or $200 a plate charity
wow,
dinner.
so big deal.
And they were squeaky clean. We were cool, we can do this. And none of us had any business, maybe Shook, because Paul had been in it an extra year over Nick and I, but we did not have any business being the paid entertainment at a $200 a plate charity dinner. And I remember doing my routine, and I reworked the shell of an act that I had at the time to at least be clean. And I remember doing it, and anytime I was suggestive, I got my biggest reaction. Anytime I dropped an entendre, the crowd popped. And I was like, okay, so maybe the organizers said work clean.
Yeah.
But the crowd isn't that clean. And I was like, so I stopped my show, and I was like, I was told because this is such a fancy event that I should work clean, but I'm getting the feeling from you guys that you want to hear a dirty joke. So do you guys want to hear a dirty joke? And the crowd's like, yeah. The whole crowd was, yeah. So I told a story about my buddy's band asking me to come on stage and dance at their show wearing a clown wig and a mask like that old Much Music commercial with the money shot.
Yeah.
So they wanted me in a thong and a clown wig, and I didn't own a thong, so I just took my underwear and hiked it up my ass crack as far as it would go. And I jump on stage, and I got a trench coat, and I whip the trench coat off, and I'm in my makeshift thong and a clown wig, and I'm doing a lot of unnecessary pelvic thrusting, and at some point I feel like a real draft down in my crotch area. And I'm like, oh no, did my junk fall out? But I'm looking at the crowd, and there's no reaction from the crowd, because I figure if a nut popped out, someone in the audience would be like, holy fuck, I can see his balls. But they're just rocking out and right into the show. So I'm like, cool. I'm dropping down. I'm humping the stage. I finish off by leaping into the audience. I grab my trench coat. I bundle back up, and I go to the back where my friends are. I'm like, did you guys see anything? Because it felt a little drafty up there. And they're like, no, man, we were watching the whole show. Looked good. And I was like, cool. Then after the show, I'm hanging out with the band, and I'm congratulating them on a good show. And some guy comes out of the crowd and goes, sweet show tonight, guys. You really rocked, but I totally wasn't expecting to see this guy's balls. Have a good one. 3 different cameras were filming it, and my nut popped out of the fly of my shorts and was whipping around like a windsock. No idea. But just my ball was all over the place. And I remember telling that story at Grand Bend, and someone's grandma was laughing so hard she was slapping the table with her head down.
Yeah.
That was like a lesson that just because they want clean doesn't mean they always want clean.
Right. It's true. No, it's absolutely true. And that's why, even a good host will go out and sort of almost just try to fly a few flags for the other comics on the show and go, watch what happens when I do dirty, watch what happens when I do edgy, watch what happens when I do dark, watch what happens when I do clean, just to see, so people can go, oh, you know what? They said to work clean. This guy's doing clean. He's doing clean funny. And it's just dying a terrible death out there. You know what I mean? So it's good to be able to, another part of our job that people don't think of is being able to actually read a room and go, I'm doing what I was told.
Switch gears,
but yeah, exactly. But it is not working for us. So
and that's the other thing is to any young comics listening, you need more than one gear.
yeah.
You need to diversify your comedy portfolio. And I always, anyone who tells me that they won't work clean, I take that as I can't work clean.
Yeah.
I'm not a good enough comic to not rely completely on filth. And if this is you and you're listening to it, yeah, I fucking said it. You can bring it up with me. If you say you won't, it means you can't. And if you can't, that means you're not the best comic you could be. Because any comic, I've seen Jason Rouse work clean, so it can be done.
Oh, absolutely. I've sat with comics while we're all spitballing ideas or whatever, and you'll hear someone bring up a good premise, and a couple people contribute some ideas, and then one person's like, oh, and then you could be like, oh, but your dick is blah blah. It's like you could tell those comics where it's just everything has to go back to the sex, and you go, it's a crutch.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Like we just came up with 2 ideas that are completely clean. I go, as soon as you put that, I go, you could do that, and it'll still be a funny joke. But now you've just taken it. Now it's a dirty joke. It was totally clean up until you had to put, dick or pussy or cum into it.
One of my best friends is, I've never used a single tag he's ever given me because it's always.
Is it all? Yeah.
It's always, then you fuck her in the pussy.
That face.
Like, what the fuck are you talking about, asshole? Like, I'm working corporate this weekend.
Yeah. It's funny too. A good friend of mine, Paul Verzi, opens for Bill Burr or whatever. Verzi, great comic. He has a strict policy of he doesn't take any tags or anything from anybody ever. He's very strict. Like if I didn't come up with it, I just never use it. And I was like, but it's okay. I'm like, you'll tell stories about what someone said. I'm like, because I just think he's great, and he's even told me tags that people have offered him for jokes. I'm like, that's fucking amazing. He's like, but I just can't. I would feel like I owe them. Like he's another sweetheart. He's just, I feel like I couldn't possibly take it. And then I'm making money from it, and they're not getting a piece. I'm like, Jesus Christ, I think it's okay. It's a gift.
Yeah,
Yeah. So but it's like everything else, right? It's a fine line because going back to what we're talking about is, it's people are so eager to be like, you took that. That's not yours. I heard that. So at the end of the day, like it's just do your joke. You'll know if you'll know if you took it, and if you took it, don't try to kid yourself. Don't spend the time writing the excuse as to why you're doing it. Just write a new joke. Take that effort, and instead of that, I don't know. What do I know? So, in your career, do you? I mean, like I said, we've talked about the milestones, everything like that. Do you have any like milestones that stand out? Did you like where you first felt like, holy shit, like I'm really, obviously we get paid and that's a great thing. But I mean, in terms of like any huge milestones, like, holy shit, like I'm actually.
I mean, there's tons of milestones. I think, going back, like the first time I got paid first time I headlined or played a club outside of Toronto.
Okay.
Was a big one. And, that was I went out to Montreal to do a co-headline with Rodney Ramsey at the Comedy Nest back when Silver was still running it. And so that to me was like a big milestone. My first festival, Winnipeg Comedy Festival 2011, will always stand out. I'll always remember that one. And like Louis C.K. opened a lot of doors for me.
Yeah. How did that? So you opened for Louis. How did that happen?
Well, that was, and it's odd because it was I say Louis opened more doors than Winning Homegrown did. Okay. Because it was in the same year, and it was 2012, and there was the Homegrown competition. They bring all the competition, and then I was 12 years in, which gives you an idea of how strict they are to the best newcomer. Right. It's like, it's Homegrown is like a breakout thing. If you're at the point where you're going to be a comedian no matter what, and this is this is a showcase. And I was in a great year. I was up against Amon, Sterling Scott, Eddie Delaseppi, Rebecca Kohler, Ryan McMahon, Kyle Bottom. I'm probably forgetting some names, but terrific comics. And I won that, and it was great. But I had my and as much as it was in Canada, it carries weight. I remember like the same night that I won, Tim Steves was really excited to find out that I won, and at the Funny or Die party, grabbed Todd Barry and was like, Todd, have you met my boy K-Trev? He won the Homegrown tonight. And Todd Barry went, oh, that's terrific. What's Homegrown? And I was like, yep, okay. But then because of the Homegrown, I got my own show at JFL 42 that year, and it was the first JFL 42. And so I was getting ready for that. I had probably I think I had 6 shows, to do. And then Zoe called me about a week before the festival started. To anyone who doesn't know Zoe Rabnett, who is one of the heads of Just for Laughs, or at least one of the bookers.
She's got an interview on One Man Podcast. Go back and listen to it.
So Zoe called me up, and I remember because I was doing the Hot Box Cafe in Kensington. I was doing a set, just working on what I was going to be doing on my show next week. And I stepped outside to answer the phone because it was Zoe.
Yeah.
And I'm like, Zoe has people whose job it is to call me for her. So if Zoe's calling me, this is important. And I stepped outside, and Zoe was like, you excited? We're about, festival starts on Friday. You excited to go? And I'm like, oh yeah, I'm ready. She goes, I know you got a lot of shows to do, but do you mind doing a few more shows? And I'm like, pile it on. Let's do it. She goes, terrific. Cause Louis C.K. has asked if you'd open for him for 2 of his shows. And I was like, don't fucking lie to me.
Yeah.
Cause I'm going to tell people this. So if this is not true, let me know now. She goes, no, we sent him a bunch of tapes of comics, and he saw yours and sent an email back that said, could I have K. Trevor Wilson for 2 shows? And I was like, holy fuck. And then I got a call the next day going, Patton Oswalt would like you to open for him because we told him you were opening for Louis. And
that's great, dude. That's so great.
And so I got to do those 2 shows. And Patton, probably the nicest person in the world. Just such a sweet man who, when someone is genuinely happy for a stranger, that's Patton Oswalt. Because I told him I'm opening for Louis, and he was like, that's so great for you. That's so great. He's like, the 2 best comedians in the world right now are Brian Regan and Louis C.K. And you're opening for one of them, and that's terrific. And I just met him.
Yeah.
So Patton's such a nice guy. Gave me a joke too, because he after I introduced him, he said, I'd like to thank the cast of Game of Thrones for opening for me.
Yeah. That's awesome.
And I started doing a joke about how I look like what would happen if Game of Thrones and Duck Dynasty had a baby. But then, so I was doing my own shows, and then I did the 2 shows with Louis, and they'd sent him a tape of me doing the penis game and church bit.
Mm-hmm.
And my first night backstage with Louis, Todd Barry was the other opener, which was really funny and cathartic because he was the guy who
What's
didn't know what
Homegrown?
Homegrown was. And we're backstage before the show talking, and Todd's like, so what are we doing? He's like, he's going to go up and do time, and then we're going to go shotgun style. So you're going to go up first, you're going to bring up Todd, and then Todd's going to bring up me. And he goes, oh, do you still do that joke about church, going to church with your mom? And I was like, yeah, I still do that. And he goes, okay, I really like that joke. So could you do it tonight? Because I want to see you do it live. And I was like, yeah, okay, I'll do the joke. And then he's like, okay, can you guys give me some time to get ready? Just give me some privacy. And we were like, oh yeah, cool. And we had our own dressing room. So Todd and I went off to our dressing room. And then Todd was like, well, what's this bit that Louis is asking you to do? Why is he asking you to do this bit? And I'm like, oh, it's this joke about, it's my closer right now. And it's a joke I do about going to church with my mom, and my brother and I are drunk and we start playing the penis game in church. And he's like, oh, that's the joke he was telling me about. Oh, it sounds like a really good joke. And it's your closer? That's not fair. I don't want to follow your closer. Do a different joke.
Somebody said? Was he fucking with you though? Yeah, I'm Todd Barry for sure. And I thought that was so funny because that's a huge deal, man. When comics quote other comics jokes, that's a compliment. You know what I mean? That you can remember it enough, you enjoyed it enough to remember it and share it. And the fact that Louis C.K. loved your joke so much that he's, telling another comic. Todd Barry's fucking amazing. Which also, I guess, for anyone listening to know that you could be Todd Barry and still intimidated, by someone else going in front of you with a great joke. You never, I don't think you ever get to a point where you're like, oh, I'm good. Put me anywhere. I'm good.
Yeah.
We're all good comics, but you can still be like, fuck.
There's still people
I still want to
following.
Oh, dude, it's unbelievable. There's guys just amazing. I swear I told you this earlier today. So for what it's worth, I don't want to say dreading because I was super excited to do today's show, but at the same time, I was just for a lunchtime 20-minute spot is nothing. but just so nervous at the idea that I'm like, fuck, I really have to do a good job before you, because I know even if you're having an off day, it's going to be a night and day difference. So I'm like, I just have to do well. I'm like, dress nicer than I do normally for a lunchtime show. Make sure you bring it. So
Well, that was the thing when I opened for Louis, because Allison Dorr was my roommate at the time. So I was like, hey Al, you want to come meet Louis C.K.? Because I can bring a guest to this thing. And she was like, fuck yeah. And we're backstage before the show, and they're, literally before the show starting, they're running over, they're going to bring me out on the God mic, and I walk out, and I turn to Alan, like, there's a pretty good chance that when they say my name, I'm going to puke in that bucket. and I didn't care about the audience. Like, I was at the Sony Center in Toronto, probably 3,000 seater. So definitely the biggest crowd I'd been in front of at this point, but I didn't care about the audience. I cared about the tall redheaded fucker who was backstage. Yeah. And so I don't know if Louis heard me say that, or if he's just a sweet guy, but right after I said I probably am going to puke in that bucket, he came up and put his arm around me. He goes, "This is the biggest show you've done so far?" And I'm like, "I'll be honest with you. Yeah, this is the largest crowd I've been in front of." And he's like, "Don't even sweat it." He's like, "These people paid a lot of money to have a good time. They are determined to have a fun time tonight."
Yeah.
So you can go out there and say hi to them 12 times. They're not even going to get mad. They're just going to think it's part of the show. So don't worry. Don't get stressed out. You go out there, plant your feet, get your head about you, do your thing. It's going to go fine. It was like, "Oh man, thanks for talking me down from the ledge. I actually don't care about them. I just hope you like it." Anyway, walked out and did the show, and it was great. And I got mentioned in a lot of articles about JFL 42, and I was given a lot of credit for generating some buzz on that. I had 2 great sets with Louis. My own solo shows did really well, and but being able to put opened for Louis C.K. in my bio when I sent it out, all of a sudden, because I every year for many years I emailed every club in the country,
right,
and at this point I'd already started working for Jason. McGlunnup had helped me get into Absolute.
I saw you for the first time the year before you won Homegrown, so you were still new to me.
And I still worked for the Nest every once in a while. I hadn't been out west yet, except for the Winnipeg Festival.
Okay.
And I showcased for Rumors at the festival, but I hadn't worked for them yet. And like Just for Laughs was my second. And Comedy Records, we'd started doing our touring, so I was working. But after I opened for Louis C.K., everybody got back to me.
Yeah.
Whoever I sent an email to got back to me. And then, some guys like Mike Harrison helped me get plugged into Edmonton. Matt Wall, I met him at Just for Laughs, and he invited me out to do Laugh Shop. Brandy Shazam, who was booking for the Mix at the time out in Vancouver, she brought me out to do a week, and but it was like after Homegrown, it was like the comics were happy for me, and it's like I sort of proved that I sort of proved I was at a certain point, but opening for Louis made the business people
right
look at me.
It was one of those credits that was like, oh fuck, okay.
And that really started, and then like after that, I just, I was on the road nonstop. Pretty much after that, I was, like I lost a bit of money doing the first run, as you always do. You go that first time you go out, you're going to take a hit. And then you figure out how to be smarter about it and how to get more extra gigs and how to save money and make extra money. But it was like that, it was, that JFL 42 really opened up a lot of doors. And then, and that was also my first Just for Laughs. And then, the next year I came back again. And then the next year at the 42 was opening for Sarah, who I had just done her gala at Just for Laughs that year. And I think JFL told her when they were getting, because they have to pitch to the hosts of the gala, they have final say on all the acts.
Really?
Yeah. This is what the JFL told me, that when they're putting together the show with the hosts, sometimes they have people they want to use, and then they have people that they want to use, and then they sort of work together to come up with a list that's good for everybody. And they were pitching me to Sarah, and they were like, well, last year Patton and Louie requested him as their opener at JFL 42, and she was like, oh, well, if Louie and Patton want him, I want him, so put him on my show. So I did the gala with her, and then when she needed an opener in Toronto for JFL 42, I think Sasha Manoli, it was like, K-Trev's in town, and Sarah already knows him, so why don't we send K-Trev? And they called up Sarah, and they're like, would K-Trev be a suitable opener? And she's like, oh, yeah, I know him. Send him. That'd be great. And then I did 2 shows with Sarah, and that got me like even more press. Polly Provenza saw me do that and invited me to do set list show. Yeah, I got like, I think the Globe and Mail called me the best opening act of JFL 42. And Sarah was, I mean, disarmingly nice. Sarah is one of the most kind and gracious people I've ever had the good fortune of working with. You walk in there nervous, and Sarah comes around the corner and sees you and gives you a great big hug and is like, we're going to have a fun time tonight. And that's what it was. It was a great time. She was just like, just so disarmingly nice at all times. Yeah. And gave my brother her leftovers from Fresh, because she was like, I got to get on a plane and I don't want this food to go to waste. And gave my brother said he had 3 meals out of Sarah's leftovers.
But like, that in a very short period of time, which is great, in a very short period of time, you too have gone from being like the guy on this side to like, dude, you're K. Trevor Wilson. Do you know what I mean? Like you are now that guy that, like I said, for myself, as much as, both of us were just guys doing middle spots and hosting for Jason, in a short period of time, like your accolades, and you've earned them. That's the best part. It's not who you know or who your family members, that you've earned them because you're a super funny guy. But now you're that guy that people are like, fuck, it's K-Trev's week. I get to work. Like you've gotten to that point. Before we started our fucking gig today, that guy came up to you, hey, are you, can I get a picture? Like, that was fucking awesome.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's so weird because I still feel the same,
Yeah, I think that's why, another reason why you're so likable is that you're not one of those guys who gets like the slightest taste of, success or even just validation. And you're like, oh, I'm better than everybody. Like, you've still been very approachable, very, very kind.
The world has wonderful ways of humbling you, because there's like so many times where I forget I'm on a TV show, and I forget that I've been doing comedy for, going on, it'll be 19 years, next September. And, so I go out and about my day, and people are staring at me, and I'm like, what the fuck's your problem? And they're like, we really love Letterkenny. And I'm like, oh, fuck, right. I have a TV show. You all know like the first time I got recognized in the airport, I thought I was in trouble.
Yeah.
A woman came up to me and said, are you K. Trevor Wilson? And I'm like, yeah. And she's like, we're such huge fans of Letterkenny. I'm like, oh, thank God, I have a TV show. I thought you found something in my bags that wasn't supposed to be there.
I have one story of a guy who kept staring at me in a Costco one time, and I do not have a TV show. But he just kept, every time we crossed paths, he would just stare at me, and I was like, and I'm not an aggressor, but finally at the lineup, right as I'm about to open my mouth, go, dude, what is your fucking problem? Absolute comedy, dude, you're fucking hilarious. I was like, I'm like probably the only person in that building who knew what I was, and I was about to tell him to go fuck himself, like, and maybe not go fuck himself.
Yeah, no, like,
but just like, dude, what have I done?
One time I was standing on the street, waiting across the street, and this guy's eyeballing me. I'm like, you got a fucking problem? He's like, I saw your set at Vapor Central last week, and it was really funny. And I'm like, fuck, I'm the dick somehow. Yeah. So like, you feel like an asshole because you forget that you're famous. And so, but every time you prepare yourself
for that, I'm famous.
It's like, well, I better be ready in case people come up to me and want to talk to me and take pictures. And then that's the day no one knows who you are.
Yeah.
And it's like, and you're just like, well, I'm an asshole for thinking that people were going to be bothering me.
Well, I used to train myself. Like I had a good source of ethics when I was working, corporate day jobs. Because I was the kind of guy, I didn't bring my uniform to work with me. I wore it to work. I'm not changing. That's extra cargo. I wore my uniform to work. Yeah. And I always used to, I remember I was taking a bus home with friends one time, and one of them started mouthing off to somebody on the bus. And I was like, dude, you're wearing your fucking TELUS shirt right now. Can you representing your company? You know what I mean? You want to mouth out to someone, fine, take your uniform off first because now you look like that. People are going to go, hey, they're going to go, that fucking TELUS guy. That's how they're going to remember you, that fucking TELUS guy. So I remembered early on when I started stand-up that I'm like, now, because I am my brand, I am my product, did I just delete something? Oh, we might not have an outro now. Oh, everything's good. That's what I was. You tap your phone. Sorry. I just remember thinking early on that I'm like, now that I'm doing comedy, now I am my brand now. I can't just go out and, I'm not me today. It's like people see you. So everywhere you go, you have to be polite and kind. And not that that's a stretch, but just to have that, that whole like, dude, what the fuck are you looking at thing? Oh yeah.
I'm at the point too where I don't just represent my brand, but I represent a whole other brand.
Yep.
In Letterkenny. And anything I do can screw it up for. I mean, I just opened for Roseanne back in April.
Oh, did you?
And
congratulations!
Congratulated her on her success. And then a month later, my agent's like, "Thank God you opened for her last month." You know.
Well, there's been some other names that have had some things happen since, but yeah, buddy, like it's an interesting thing. Like I said, I mean, do you get it a lot? Do you get the recognition from the show a lot? Or?
Oh yeah. Like my girl, it's really funny because my girlfriend has a diagnosed social anxiety disorder.
Okay.
That's not the funny part, but we'll be out at restaurants and tables are looking at us, you know, and my girlfriend will be, she just like, that's the part about dating me that she hates is people, just the staring. And she was like, if they know you, I want them to come over and say it. So at least I know why they're fucking staring.
Yeah. No, I get that. Well, it's like, because you and I, even in the stories we just told, it's like why are you staring at me? Why are you staring at me?
Yeah.
So they're having the same, why are you staring at him? Why the fuck are you staring at him? Like, okay, so going into that, Letterkenny, I saw a lot of the YouTube videos, the internet videos that made that show, you know, come to be.
Mm-hmm.
But of all the characters on the show, if I'm not mistaken, initially, you're the only one that wasn't in the videos, but was added to the show.
No. A good chunk of the cast wasn't in the original videos.
Really? Okay.
The original videos had 4 members of the cast in it. So there was Jared and Nate, who are Wayne and Daryl. Jared being the creator of the show, co-head writer, executive producer, creator, star. He's the franchise. He's Captain Canada, Captain Letterkenny. And then Nate Dales, who plays Daryl, they were the original 2 because the first 2 were just the straight to camera Letterkenny problems. So the original Skid from the produce stand bit, he was a Vancouver actor, and they didn't flesh out that character.
Okay.
The hockey players, Riley and Jonesy, those are the only other 2 guys from the original sketches. The hockey players, and actually they like there's been whole stories of putting together a show in Canada. Requires there's like so many little rules about how many people you can hire from different areas, and because the show was filmed in Ontario, there was restrictions about how many actors they could bring from outside, and a lot of the guys that were involved in the early development of it were all BC because that's where Jared was living when he was creating those shorts. And they both those guys, Dylan Playfair and Andrew Herr, who play Riley and Jonesy, had to audition to play the characters they created.
Really?
Yeah. So but they were amazing because they created the characters, and that's who they are in a sense. I mean, those characters are parodies of their true selves.
Right.
You know,
Jared couldn't just say, I want those guys, that's their job.
No. Him and Nate were sort of signed right away as the package, but everybody else had to audition to get in there. And a good chunk of the guys like Andrew and Dylan and Tyler Johnson, who plays Stewart, the Skid, along with Jamie Lapointe, who plays the Ginger, the ostrich fucker, and Jared, were all on the same beer league hockey. Oh, and Nathan were all on the same beer league hockey team in Vancouver. And they were all buddies before that. And Dan Petronevich, who plays McMurray, and Alexander DeJordy, who played the second skit. He left after season 2, I believe. They were Jared's cast members from his other show, 19.2. So a lot of the people that came in had a connection to Jared, and actually Lisa Codrington, who plays Gail, Michelle Milet, who plays Katie, and myself were the 3 members of the main cast who had no history with Jared before the show. We were the only ones who did not have a previous relationship with him. And so like my first meeting with him was my first day of work in Sudbury, and Jared Kiso walked up to me and handed me a mixed CD and a bottle of Jameson and said, "Welcome to Letterkenny." And I said, "You and I are going to get along just fine."
Now, how did you hear about this role?
Well, I mean, I was a fan of the shorts.
Okay.
Cal Post and I used to have a podcast, a video podcast, and we would play the sketches as we found them. So I was a fan, and and it was like the old fashioned way. My agent sent me a breakdown, like, you got an audition next week. Now the producers of the show, New Metric Media, I had met with them several times. They, Mark Montefiore and Patrick O'Sullivan, had approached me previously at Just for Laughs, and we had already talked about me developing a TV series based on my stand-up, and I had already pitched them a couple ideas that they'd passed on, but they were fans of mine and were looking for projects for us to work on. So they, I think they sort of went to bat for me with Jacob Tierney and Jared Kiso. Jacob's the director and other co-head writer. He also plays Glenn, the minister on our show.
Okay.
And because my role was created for Dan Petronevich, who plays McMurray. He was the original Squirrely Dan. And they cast him. Like, they pushed for me and they liked me, but Jared was going to be loyal to his buddy, and Dan had network approval. He was ready to go.
Okay. And
be Squirrely Dan, but he had some things happening in his life at that time, and he got cast in Suicide Squad, and it was a choice of, he no longer could commit to the show in the way that they needed him to, and so Dan stepped into the role of McMurray, and they brought me in to play Squirrely Dan. And as the story goes, changed the show forever, because the character would have been very different, played by Petronevich. And I don't know if McMurray would have been, I don't know if I would have been McMurray or what the hell would have happened there.
Yeah.
But it was one of those, it was another one of those things where he had the job and then couldn't do it. And then I got the job,
years later, the understudy role.
Why you can't count on acting. So I got, New Metric went to bat for me, and then Jared and Jacob liked what I'd done, liked what I brought to the character, but still didn't know me that well, didn't know what my sensibilities were going to be, if our sense of humors were going to gel. We didn't know what it was going to be. And so the part that Dan originally had, that Squirrely Dan originally in the script, got scaled back a bit. And then I came in and we did the first table read. And after the first table read, Jared came up to me and went, "I'm going to give you back all the stuff we took away from you." And my part got beefed up again, because it was like, after the first table read, Jared's like, "I can work with this guy and we can have a lot of fun." And we just took off running. And I brought to Squirrely Dan the malapropisms and the extra. In the script, there was a little bit of that, but that was for everybody. That was just hick speak.
Yeah.
But I was like, I wanted to do something that the other two guys weren't doing, to set myself apart from them. And I was like, okay, I'm going to be the full-on mushmouth of the group. I'm going to be the guy who does not know how to speak English, even though it's his first language. Because playing small towns, as long as I have in Canada,
yeah, that's the language that they have.
I've met that guy a million times. And so I brought that into the character, and Jared came up to me pretty early on and was like, "I'm really glad you're doing that, because I really wanted you to do that, but I didn't know how to tell you to do that. So thank you for doing that." And that like became sort of my hallmark, what I brought to the show. So every time they sent me the script, I would sit there and go through and figure out which words
To
I was
like
gonna
mumble
mess
or
up,
whatever. Yeah.
you know, which words and how I was going to pronounce them wrong. And then we'd sit there, like sometimes I'd show up on the day and sit down with Jared and Nate. It's like, is it funnier if I mess up this word, or is it funnier if I mess up this word? Like, should I say, should I add plurals here, or should I pronounce intranasales intranasally? Like, which is funnier? And we have those debates. It's like the weird debates you have when you're in a comedy show. It's like, is it funnier if we fart here or burp? Like,
Which bodily function is the most hysterical?
I remember Jared, after the second season, Jared came to me and was like, I don't want you to act out your farts anymore. Because in the first two
like
seasons,
cock or
anytime
something?
I'd fart, I'd do like the cheek sneak, or I'd do the move.
Yeah.
I'd do a butt acting to signify that I'd farted. And he was like, I think it might be funnier if we just have the sound and your body doesn't change. And that's how we started playing farts after that, is I don't play the fart. We just let the fart happen. And Jared's like, yeah, I like this so much better because we're just letting the fart happen.
Yeah.
We're not overselling the fart.
Right?
These are conversations we have to have. Are we overselling the fart?
That's hysterical. So, I mean, I know you do have to go soon,
Yeah.
so I'll do my best to lead us down the final stretch here. Another big thing that, again, like I mentioned earlier, super excited for. You did Kimmel. Was it last year?
Jeez, it's starting to mesh together. I think, it was last January.
Yeah.
It was last January. Because I was dating Marisa, so it was last January. That was a ton of fun. That came about from roast battles,
Right.
which came about because there's the roast battles that everyone saw, the televised one. There was actually another roast battles the year before it, Just for Laughs, which was a dry run for the format. And it was the Jeff Ross International Roast Masters Tournament. And there was representatives from Canada, England, United States, and Australia. And there was more Canadians in it that year. Mark Ford, Sean Cullen, Mike Ward, all were in that one. And I did really well. I made it to the semifinals, got beat by Matt Broussard.
Okay.
But they liked me so much that they brought me back for the finals to do like an exhibition match against Brad Williams. And then when they were doing the televised one, Jeff Ross and the Roast Battles guys went to bat for me. And they were like, because they wanted to have like one Canadian, one Australian, one Brit, and then all the rest American. And they were like, K-Trev is the Canadian we want. And Comedy Central wanted a more famous Canadian. They wanted Tom Green or someone like that. And the other guys were like, no, K-Trev made it to the semis last year. He knows the format. He's going to kill this. He's the guy. And they brought me in and I had a good run. Made it to the semifinals, lost to Mike Lawrence and Earl Skakel, but had a good run. And, one of the nights, the night I battled Tony Hinchcliffe, the judges were Jimmy Kimmel and Seth Rogen. They were
Very cool.
special guest judges. So it was really fun because I got to meet Seth Rogen backstage, and for years I'd been compared to Seth because of my voice. Like I literally had people come into my show because they heard me and thought I was Seth Rogen. And we have mutual friends. I've known Jay Baruchel since before I went to Humber. We did a Pizza Pops ad together when we were 19. And then I was also in Art of the Steel with Jay. And so he's really good friends with Jacob Turney. So when I met Seth, but also one of Seth's good friends married a girl I grew up with in Etobicoke, Jess Hogeveen, that I went to grade school with. So I was like, we have mutual friends. I'm like, first off, I'm in Canadian entertainment. So obviously I've worked with Jay. And then he was explaining to the American guys, anyone who's ever worked in Canada has done something with Jay
at some point. Yeah.
Because, but actually, my friend Jess Hogeveen married your buddy, and he was like, "Oh, I just had dinner with them." So, the small world thing. It was really fun to finally meet Seth after all the years of being told how much I sound like him. But then also, Jimmy was the other judge, and I had a great meeting with Jimmy coming out of the. I had just taken a shit.
As all good stories of success.
And I was coming out of the stall, and at the moment I came out of the stall and was washing my hands, Jimmy was coming in with his cousin Sal to use the urinal, and Jimmy started chatting me up. And I'm having this full conversation with Jimmy Kimmel about the state of Canadian comedy, what the road's like, what I've been doing, where I'm at in my career. And I'm like, I'm washing my hands, but now I'm like, I have no reason to be in this bathroom anymore, except I'm having a conversation with Jimmy and he's got his dick in his hand. I'm hoping no one notices how bad I just wrecked that stall. So I'm like in this very awkward conversation because I want to leave because it smells like my shit. And he's holding his penis. But Jimmy's just chatting away as if doesn't have his dick in his hand and it doesn't smell like shit in there. And I don't want to go because when am I going to have this opportunity to have this talk again? So we have this full conversation, part ways, very nice. And then the next day I'm at, the Hyatt bar. And I remember I brought my brother with me to Just for Laughs that year. And I was like really tired. I'm like, you know what? We should do once a round of the bar just to see who's there. Because it's always a good chance to schmooze and we might run into someone we haven't seen yet. And as I was doing my rounds, I was chatting up some of my Montreal friends or someone, and this guy comes up, introduces himself to me as a producer on the Jimmy Kimmel Show, and that when Jimmy had flown back to Los Angeles the night before, he called everyone or emailed everyone that was still at Just for Laughs and was like, track down Trevor Wilson and book him.
Really?
Yeah.
Good for you.
So I was already in talks.
It wasn't just like, hey, you thought you might want to. Straight up, he looked like he wanted.
He sent his people out to find me, and I was already in talks to do Conan at that time. But Kimmel was very big on my first late show appearance being his show. Because it turned out that was the thing he was starting. All last year, the only stand-ups he booked had never done late night TV before. He was giving a first crack to everyone. And that was his mandate for the year was brand new comics. So
it's ABC, man. Disney.
I spent the next few months working on a set, getting it vetted. We finally, the process that I went through it was a great education on American TV and dealing with producers. Because in Canada, there's so much less pressure. Mm-hmm. There's less people employed by the show. There's less money at stake. There's a whole lot of don't give a fuck in Canadian TV. And in the United States, like every time I sent a tape, I would get notes back from 5 different people. And what I eventually figured out through trial and error is that I had to put a note from everybody into that set.
Okay.
I had to incorporate each of their notes so that each of them could have that moment where they go,
that was me.
I told him to do that.
What can I ask what those notes are like? Like, dude, everything from like how to get an agent and who do you even start to email for that kind of stuff just seems so off. But in terms of getting notes, so you put your thing out, your video.
I send them a tape and then they'd send back, like they like this, but they didn't like this. Like maybe if I should try this or, don't do this, but do this. And it was really weird because I initially wanted to do a 5-minute bit because that's my style. I'm a long form story guy. So I sent them a pure 5-minute bit and they were like, we don't like stories from our stand-ups. If you're going to do a story, you do it at the couch. Right. From the stand-ups, we want bits. So they was like, okay, you brought me in because you like what I do, but now you want me to do something different from what it is that I do. And so the set I ended up putting together was small jokes from giant bits. Like I was cherry picking my own set to build a 5.
I recognized parts of a joke and I would look at the person next to me. There's so much more to that joke.
And that was the whole set. And it was literally just this producer liked that line, so I keep it. This producer liked that line, so I kept it. This producer liked that line, so I kept it. And in the end, I had 5 minutes made up of lines that producers had liked. And the guy who initially had approached me in Just for Laughs and who I'd been doing the most contact with, when I went to do Kimmel, it was his last day because he had quit. Because he was like, I'm so sick of all of this bullshit. And going through the process of putting your set together really showed me that I wasn't happy here anymore. And so I wanted to see this through and I wanted to see your set and then I'm done after this.
And you had said too, I think I saw on Instagram or Twitter or something, the cast of Letterkenny had sent you a gift basket or something like that to your room afterwards.
Yeah, they sent me a lovely gift basket. Everyone Jimmy was so nice and just like literally one of the nicest guys, like so gracious, came out before the show when I was backstage and talked to me and then invited me over to the couch.
Dude, I thought that was so huge because you hear about that back in the day with Carson. I don't see comics sitting down on the couch unless you're Bill Burr.
That's the first time they've ever shot a stand-up live on Kimmel. It was my set. Every other time they pre-record the stand-ups, put them in the can, and when they need filler, pull out a stand-up tape that they already have. I was the first stand-up in the history of the Kimmel Show to perform in front of the live studio audience with Jimmy right there watching. And I was the first stand-up to be invited to the couch after my set.
That's fuck. Well,
And
dude, congratulations.
the first Canadian, like living, working in Canada stand-up to appear on Jimmy Kimmel.
Honestly, nobody better have, dude. Like I said,
And Mike
so yeah, man. Well, I'm so happy. Honestly, in the last year, I've seen a lot of guys that like I said, that I think are genuinely good dudes. I love seeing what's going on with you. I love watching what's going on with Nathan. I love what's going on
Nate's
with
the shit.
Yeah, man. and even DJ's having a fucking,
DJ's having a great time.
and I love, and the thing is, coming up with you guys now. Obviously, you guys started before me, but just like I said, doing shows where one of us is hosting, one of us is featuring, like to see that growth. Do you know what I mean? Like I started in this business with guys who were already up here.
Yeah.
It's been very cool for me in my, short, I've been doing it for 10 years, but even still in that short period of time in stand-up is to see guys going from like middles to hosts to headliners. And then that, you'd think that in and of itself, when you're new, you're like, the headliner, yeah, I've made it. To watch you guys doing the festivals and the shows and everything like that. Like I said, it's really cool to see the successes and whatnot. Now, I do want to ask, I guess it's sort of maybe a weird last question, but this is something a lot of my listeners tend to relate to, is just, I ask, is there any point along the way where you had your moments of doubt where you're like, maybe.
Oh, I probably almost quit twice.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. If you don't ever doubt yourself in entertainment, much less the comedy part of entertainment, you're insane. Like you are delusional if you never have a doubt that this is the right path for you. I almost threw in the towel. Like at one point I was expecting to get brought back to do a TV show I was on. I had submitted for a festival and I had all these things that I was like, this is my year. Like I'm going to get these things. And then one by one, they all didn't, like, just,
wow.
They didn't happen. And I was like, I was counting on all of these things. And I was like sitting in my shitty apartment, crestfallen, just like, I can't do this anymore. I can't keep telling myself that it's going to happen because nothing has happened yet. And I was like, I need a new path. Like this obviously is not what I'm supposed to do. So I was like, tomorrow I'll call my dad. I'll see about, if he can help me get back into school, if he's willing to pay for university again or something like that. Cause maybe I'll go to school for broadcasting and get into radio, something. Whatever this is, it's not working. And then I made that choice and, I got a phone call from Ryan Denis asking me if I wanted to do a tour he was putting together called the Sex, Drugs, and Comedy Tour. And I was like, okay, yeah. Like I'll put it on hold for a little bit. We'll do this tour, see what this is, and then I'll go back to university. And then I got an email from Gary Rideout saying my sketch troupe had been accepted into the Toronto Sketch Comedy Festival after someone last minute dropout. And I was like, okay, so we'll do that festival and I'll do this tour and we'll see what happens after that. And then Billable Hours, which was the TV show I'd worked on the year before, called me up and they're like, this is going to be the final season, but we're bringing you in for 3 episodes. And I was like, okay, maybe I shouldn't quit yet.
Yeah.
And, never made that phone call to my dad because those 3 things that I'd lost came back, right? Like, and it was like right after I'd made that decision that I'm never going to do this again. I got like, the universe was like, oh, fuck, send him something, throw something.
Do something. We can't have this one. Sorry, we ignored this pot for too long. Okay, here's something.
And that was like, because really the Sex, Drugs, and Comedy Tour started it for me because we pissed off enough people. Yuck Yucks hated the fact that we were doing this tour. Other comics hated the fact that we were doing this tour because they weren't on the tour. And the tour wasn't even that successful, but we pissed off enough people that they took notice. And Breslin hired away half of the tour to keep us from ever doing it again. And then whoever wasn't working with Yuck Yucks, Jay started booking.
Yep.
And like Merhesh and I took off on one side, and Brian O'Gorman and Ryan Denis took off on the other side. But it was really sex, drugs, and comedy that, because we just suddenly we'd done something that made people go, well, if we don't stop these people, they're going to keep making money without us.
Yeah.
And we can't have that.
Yeah. Well, and it's cool to see guys like Trent McClellan did an interview with him, and Trent was just very big on like, a lot of people see what Yucks is doing and like, well, why won't Yucks give me work and why won't Jason give me work? And he's like, those are just business models. You know, you're in a position where you can rent a theater yourself, and if you want to assume the risk, then you can also assume all the reward too. But now you have to work harder. Like it's on you at this point. It's great to see everything you do. I'll ask you this one last thing. What's next for you? Do you have anything that's coming down the pipeline that maybe you can share with us, or anything next you're looking forward to?
Well, I'm going to be going back to JFL this year and hosting Homegrown, but we're televising it this year. It's going to be on TV. And it's not a contest anymore. It's just a showcase of, up and coming Canadian talent. And it's going to be called Homegrown Comedy with Trevor Wilson. And I'm really excited to be doing that. We're going back to, we have the new season of Letterkenny comes out next week. And then in the beginning of July, we debut on Hulu in the United States. So we get our, we're not paying any tariffs. We're just coming. Letterkenny's headed to the States, and we go back to work in August. And I feel like I can say this. I'm working on getting my set vetted for a half-hour Netflix.
That's awesome, dude. Congratulations.
Thanks a lot, bud.
Super, super happy for you. I appreciate you taking the time to sit down with me. I hope everyone has enjoyed listening to the stories, and of course, maybe next time you're in town, come in and share some more stories with us.
Sounds good, bud. Thanks for
Thanks,
having
brother.
me.
I appreciate it.